I was sitting in my garage on a Saturday morning in Phoenix, Arizona, polishing the chrome on my 1967 Shelby GT 500, when I heard the unmistakable sound of high heels clicking across my driveway. I knew exactly who it was before I even looked up. Barbara Henderson, the president of our homeowner association, had that particular rhythm to her walk that screamed self-importance. She was a woman in her late 40s with an asymmetrical blonde bob that she probably thought made her look younger, but really just emphasized the permanent scowl lines around her mouth. "Excuse me, Ethan," she called out in that nasally voice that could strip paint off a wall. "I need to speak with you about your vehicle situation." I straightened up from where I was crouching by the front fender and wiped my hands on a shop towel. The morning sun was already getting hot, typical for May in Phoenix, and I could feel sweat starting to form on my forehead. I had moved into this subdivision of Scottsdale 6 months ago, and Barbara had been a thorn in my side since day one. The woman seemed to live for finding violations in the neighborhood. "Morning, Barbara. What seems to be the problem?" She gestured dramatically at my Shelby, like it was some kind of rusted-out junker instead of a pristine piece of American automotive history worth over $200,000. This car. It has been sitting in your driveway for 3 weeks now. According to HOA Regulation Section 7.3, no vehicles are to be parked in driveways for extended periods. All vehicles must be stored in garages or behind homes where they are not visible from the street. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. This was not the first time we had this conversation, and Barbara had a talent for twisting rules to suit her agenda. "Barbara, I've been working on this car. It's not abandoned. I drive it regularly. I just happened to be detailing it this morning, which is why it's in the driveway instead of the garage." "That's irrelevant," she snapped, pulling out her phone and taking photos of the Shelby. "The rule clearly states no extended parking in driveways. I have documented this vehicle being here repeatedly, and I'm issuing you a formal violation notice. If this car is not moved permanently into your garage within 24 hours, I will have it towed at your expense." The threat hung in the air between us. I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced a smile. "You're really going to tow a classic car that's worth more than most houses in this neighborhood? The rules apply to everyone, Mr. Zimmerman. No exceptions." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house 3 doors down, her phone still in hand, probably already composing an email to the HOA board about what a terrible rule breaker I was. I stood there in the Arizona heat, watching her go and feeling anger bubble up in my chest. The thing was, Barbara did not know several important facts about me. First, I was not just some random homeowner she could bully. Second, I owned Zimmerman Towing and Recovery, one of the largest towing companies in the greater Phoenix area. Third, my company happened to have an exclusive contract with our HOA for all towing services in the neighborhood. A fact I had kept quiet because I liked my privacy and did not feel the need to broadcast my business to every neighbor. I pulled out my phone and called my office manager, Rita, who had been with me since I started the company 8 years ago. She answered on the second ring. "Hey boss, what's up? It's your day off. Rita, I need you to pull up our contract with Sunset Hills HOA. I have a feeling Barbara Henderson is about to call in a tow request, and I want to handle this one personally." There was a pause, then Rita laughed. "Oh no, what did she do now? Wait, let me guess, your Shelby. Bingo. She's threatening to have it towed within 24 hours if I do not keep it in the garage permanently. Just flag any calls that come in from the HOA about my address. I want to be the one to respond. You got it. This is going to be good. Should I make popcorn? Just keep me posted." I hung up and looked at my car. The Shelby gleamed in the morning sun, its blue paint with white racing stripes absolutely flawless. I had spent 3 years restoring this beauty, hunting down original parts and doing most of the work myself. It was my pride and joy, and Barbara Henderson thought she could just have it hauled away like garbage. I spent the rest of the day working on the car, making sure to keep it in my driveway. If Barbara wanted a war, I would give her one. By evening, I rolled the Shelby into my garage, not because she demanded it, but because I was done with my work for the day. I had 2 other vehicles, a Ford F-150 that I used for daily driving and a BMW 5 Series that I used for business meetings. Both were parked in my 3-car garage alongside the Shelby. Sunday morning arrived, and I decided to take the Shelby out for a drive. The engine roared to life with that distinctive American muscle car sound that never got old. I backed out of my driveway around 8 in the morning and saw Barbara's curtains twitch in her front window. She was watching, just as I expected. I drove to my favorite breakfast spot in Old Town Scottsdale, enjoyed some coffee and eggs, then took the long way home through the desert roads where I could really open up the engine. When I got back around noon, there was a bright orange violation notice stuck to my mailbox. I pulled it off and read Barbara's typed message. Final warning. Vehicle in violation of HOA regulations observed in driveway. Towing will commence if vehicle is not permanently garaged. You have been warned multiple times. Next violation will result in immediate towing and fines. I crumpled the notice and tossed it in my recycling bin. My phone buzzed. It was Rita. "Boss, just got a call from Barbara Henderson. She wants a truck sent to your address tomorrow morning to tow a vehicle. She specifically requested first thing like 7 in the morning." "What did you tell her?" "That we would have someone there." She seemed really pleased with herself, practically giggling into the phone. She asked about fees and I quoted her our standard HOA contract rate. "Evan," she actually said, and I quote, "I do not care what it costs." Some people need to learn they are not above the rules. I could not help but laugh. "All right, here's what we are going to do. Confirm the appointment. Tell her the truck will be there at 7 sharp. I will personally handle this call." Oh, this is going to be legendary. "I will make sure all the paperwork is in order. Do you want me to notify the rest of the crew?" "No, let's keep this quiet. I will take one of the flatbeds. This is just between us for now." Monday morning, I woke up at 5:30 and got ready. Instead of my usual casual clothes, I put on my company uniform, a dark blue work shirt with Zimmerman Towing and Recovery embroidered on it, along with my name badge that read Ethan Z, owner/operator. I grabbed the keys to one of our flatbed tow trucks that I kept at my house for emergencies and headed out. At 6:45, I pulled the massive flatbed into my own driveway. The truck was impossible to miss, bright white with blue lettering, our company logo splashed across both sides, and amber lights on top. I backed it up carefully and positioned it right in front of my garage. Then I got out, clipboard in hand, and waited. Sure enough, at exactly 7 o'clock, Barbara came power walking down the street. She was dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit, her hair perfectly styled, wearing what I suspected was her important business outfit. She had her phone out, recording, a triumphant smile on her face. "Oh good, you are right on time," she said to me, not even really looking at my face as she focused on getting her video angle right. The vehicle in question is the blue classic car. It belongs to the homeowner, and he has repeatedly violated our HOA regulations despite multiple warnings. "I am Barbara Henderson, HOA President, and I am authorizing this tow under Section 7.3 of our community guidelines." "Madam, I need to verify some information first, I said, keeping my voice professional and slightly lower than my normal speaking tone. I was curious how long it would take her to recognize me. Yes, yes, whatever you need. I have all the documentation right here. She thrust a folder at me without looking up from her phone, still recording the Shelby in my driveway. I opened the folder and flipped through the pages. Inside were printed copies of the HOA regulations, photos of my car in my driveway from various dates, and a formal towing authorization form signed by Barbara and 2 other board members. I had to admit, she had been thorough in her documentation, even if her interpretation of the rules was completely ridiculous. So you want this 1967 Shelby GT 500 towed because it was parked in the driveway? I asked. Exactly. Multiple violations. The owner thinks he is special, but rules are rules. No extended parking in driveways. It is an eyesore and brings down property values. She finally lowered her phone and really looked at me for the first time. I watched as recognition slowly dawned on her face. Her expression went from triumphant to confused to horrified in about 3 seconds. Ethan, that's me. Ethan Zimmerman, owner of Zimmerman Towing and Recovery, the company your HOA has an exclusive contract with. I tapped my name badge for emphasis. I believe you called requesting a tow of this vehicle at this address. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But this is a conflict of interest, not really. You called my company to tow my car. I'm just responding to the service request. Now, according to the authorization form you provided, you want this vehicle removed from the premises immediately. Is that correct? Barbara's face had gone from pale to red. You cannot. This is not. You should have told us you owned a towing company. Why? There's no HOA regulation requiring homeowners to disclose their businesses. I checked, thoroughly. In fact, I've read every single page of our HOA documents, which is more than I can say for some people. I gestured at her folder. For instance, Section 7.3, which you love to cite, actually refers to abandoned or inoperable vehicles. It specifically states that vehicles being actively used and maintained by homeowners are exempt. There's even a clause about classic and antique vehicles being allowed in driveways for maintenance and display purposes, as long as they are properly registered and insured. That's not. She was flustered now, her carefully constructed authority crumbling. I pulled out my own folder from the truck's cab. I took the liberty of bringing my own documentation. Here's the registration for the Shelby, showing it's current and valid. Here's the insurance policy, showing full coverage. Here are maintenance records proving it's actively maintained. And here's a copy of Section 7.3, with the full text highlighted, showing that classic vehicles like mine are specifically protected under HOA rules. Barbara snatched the papers from my hand and scanned them frantically. I could see the moment she realized I was right. Her face went through another color change, this time settling on an angry purple. This is ridiculous. The spirit of the rule clearly means all vehicles should be garaged when not in active use. The spirit of the rule doesn't matter. The letter of the law does. You've been citing regulations at me for months now, Barbara. I figured it was time I actually read them carefully. Turns out, you've been wrong about quite a few things. A small crowd had started to gather. Several neighbors had come out to watch the spectacle, probably drawn by the sight of the massive tow truck in my driveway. I recognized Tom and Jennifer Martinez from across the street, the elderly Mr. Peterson from next door, and a few others whose names I had not learned yet. Barbara noticed the audience and seemed to regain some of her composure. Fine. You may be technically correct about this one regulation, but that doesn't change the fact that your vehicle is a nuisance. I will bring this before the full HOA board, and we will take appropriate action. You do that. In the meantime, I'll be sending my company's invoice to the HOA for the service call. According to our contract, false or canceled tow requests still incur a minimum fee of $250 for the truck roll. Plus, there's a clause about inappropriate use of emergency services. Since this clearly wasn't a legitimate towing situation, I think that applies. Her eyes went wide. You would not dare. Oh, I absolutely would. You called my company, Barbara. You authorized a tow under false pretenses. That's a billable service call, unless you'd like to pay it personally instead of having it come out of HOA funds. I accept cash, check, or credit card. Tom Martinez started laughing from across the street. Oh man, this is the best thing I've seen all year. Barbara, I think you finally met your match. Barbara shot him a venomous look, then turned back to me. This is not over, Ethan. Not by a long shot. You think you are clever, but I have been running this HOA for 6 years. I know how to handle problem residents. Looking forward to it, I said cheerfully. Now, if you will excuse me, I have actual work to do. You know, legitimate tow calls from people who actually need help. Have a great day, Barbara. She stormed off, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. The neighbors who had gathered started to disperse, several of them giving me thumbs up or friendly waves. Tom Martinez jogged over. Dude, that was awesome. Do you really own the towing company? I do. Have for 8 years now, started with 1 truck and built it up. Barbara's been making my life miserable over my RV. Says it's not allowed in the driveway even though I only park it there when I'm loading up for trips. Maybe you could help me understand the actual rules. Happy to. Why don't you give me your number, and I will send you a copy of the relevant sections. Might want to share them with the other neighbors too. I have a feeling Barbara's been playing fast and loose with the regulations for a while now. Tom grinned. Oh, she has. She tried to fine the Patel family for having a vegetable garden in their backyard. Said it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. Never mind that you can't even see their backyard from the street. We exchanged numbers, and Tom headed back to his house. I climbed into the tow truck and drove it back to my company's main yard on the east side of Phoenix. My operations manager, Carlos, was waiting when I pulled in. Rita told me about your HOA situation. How'd it go? Better than expected. You should have seen Barbara's face when she realized who I was. Carlos laughed. Man, I wish I could have been there. So what's next? You think she's going to back off? Not a chance. Barbara's the type who doubles down when challenged. She'll find some other excuse to come after me or try to get me thrown out of the neighborhood somehow. Can she do that? Honestly, I don't know. That's why I need to do some research. Can you cover things here today? I want to spend some time going through our HOA contract and the governing documents with a fine-tooth comb. No problem, boss. We've got a light schedule anyway. You go make sure you're protected. I spent the rest of Monday in my home office, reading through every page of the HOA documents, taking notes and cross-referencing regulations. What I discovered was eye-opening. Barbara had been violating proper procedure left and right. For instance, the HOA was supposed to hold monthly board meetings with published agendas, but I could only find records of 3 meetings in the past year. Fines were supposed to be issued only after a formal hearing process, but Barbara had been sending out violation notices and fine assessments without any due process. There were financial irregularities, 2 expenses that seemed questionable, like $5,000 paid to Barbara's sister's landscaping company for emergency tree trimming that I could find no record of actually happening. The more I dug, the more problems I found. This was not just about Barbara being overzealous. This was potentially fraud and embezzlement. I started compiling a detailed report, documenting everything I found with dates, amounts, and references to the specific regulations being violated. Tuesday morning, I got a call from Rita. "Boss, you need to hear this. Barbara Henderson just called again. She wants to schedule a compliance inspection of your property. Says it's a routine thing the HOA does to make sure all homes meet community standards. In the 6 months I've lived there, I've never heard of anyone getting a compliance inspection." That's what I thought too. She was really insistent though. Said she needs to inspect your garage, your backyard, everything. Claims it's within her rights as HOA president. I pulled up the HOA documents on my computer and searched for anything about inspections. There it was, section 12.7. The HOA board reserves the right to conduct exterior compliance inspections of all properties to ensure adherence to community standards. Such inspections shall be scheduled with reasonable notice and conducted during daylight hours. Inspections are limited to areas visible from common areas and do not include interior spaces unless specifically invited by the homeowner. I read the section to Rita. So she can look at my exterior, but she has no right to enter my garage or backyard unless I let her. What are you going to do? Let her do her inspection. I'll make sure everything is perfect. In fact, I think I'll document the whole thing. Barbara wants to play games. I'll play right back. Wednesday morning arrived with another one of Phoenix's beautiful sunny days. I had spent Tuesday afternoon making sure my property was absolutely immaculate. Lawn perfectly mowed, hedges trimmed, no weeds in sight, trash cans stored where they should be, house numbers clean and visible, mailbox pristine. Everything that could possibly be cited was in perfect compliance. Barbara showed up at 9 o'clock with 2 other board members in tow. One was a thin, nervous-looking man named Gerald Finch, and the other was a woman in her 50s named Patricia Wells. I had seen them both at HOA meetings but never had much interaction with either. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, standing in my driveway with my phone in hand, video recording active. "I understand you're here to conduct a compliance inspection." Barbara's eyes narrowed when she saw the phone. "You don't need to record this." "Actually, I do. Section 12.7 says inspections must be documented, and I prefer to have my own documentation. Unless you object, in which case I'd have to wonder what you're planning to do that you don't want recorded." Gerald and Patricia exchanged uncomfortable glances. Barbara's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. "Fine. Let's get this over with." They walked around my property with clipboards, examining everything. I followed behind, camera rolling, making sure to capture every moment. Barbara was clearly frustrated that she could not find anything wrong. My house was only 2 years old when I bought it, so there were no maintenance issues. My landscaping was professionally done and maintained. My vehicles were all properly registered and parked appropriately. After about 30 minutes, they finished their exterior inspection. Barbara stood at my front door, looking supremely annoyed. "We need to inspect your garage and backyard. Section 12.7 says you're limited to areas visible from common areas. My garage and backyard aren't visible from the street or any common areas. So no, you don't have access to those areas unless I invite you, which I'm not going to do." "That's extremely suspicious," Barbara said. "What are you hiding? My privacy. It's called the Fourth Amendment. Look it up." Patricia spoke up for the first time. "Ethan, we're just trying to make sure the community is maintained properly. Can't you work with us a little?" "Patricia, I'd be happy to work with you if this was actually about community standards, but this isn't. This is Barbara harassing me because I embarrassed her on Monday." If you want to see my garage and backyard, get a warrant. Otherwise, we're done here." I turned and walked back into my house, closing the door behind me. Through the window, I watched as the three of them stood on my driveway arguing. Barbara was gesticulating wildly while Gerald looked uncomfortable, and Patricia seemed to be trying to calm her down. That afternoon, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a notice of a special board meeting scheduled for the following Monday evening. The agenda had one item: discussion and potential removal of Ethan Zimmerman from the community for failure to comply with HOA regulations and obstructing official HOA business. I could not believe what I was reading. Barbara was actually trying to force me to sell my house and move. This had escalated way beyond anything reasonable. I immediately called my attorney, Marcus Chen, who handled all my business legal matters. "Marcus, I need your help with a personal issue. My HOA president is trying to kick me out of my neighborhood." I spent an hour explaining the entire situation to Marcus, from the initial car incident to the inspection to the latest notice. He listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. "Ethan, I'm going to be honest with you. What Barbara is attempting is almost certainly illegal. You can't just remove a homeowner because the HOA president doesn't like them. There's a very specific process for things like that, and it requires proving that the homeowner has violated major community rules repeatedly and refused to correct the issues. From what you're telling me, you haven't violated anything. So what do I do? First, you're going to that meeting and I'm coming with you. Second, we're going to bring all your documentation showing you're in compliance with every regulation. Third, we're going to make it very clear that if they proceed with this nonsense, you'll file a lawsuit for harassment and abuse of authority. And fourth, based on what you told me about the financial irregularities you found, I think we need to report this to the proper authorities. I don't want to blow this up into a huge legal thing, Marcus. I just want to live in my house and work on my car in peace." "I understand, but Barbara has already blown it up. She's not going to stop unless someone makes her stop. Trust me on this. I've dealt with problem HOAs before. The only thing people like Barbara understand is force. You need to show her you're not someone she can bully." The weekend passed slowly. I spent my time gathering every piece of documentation I could find: receipts for my property maintenance, photos showing my compliance with all regulations, copies of the HOA documents with my notes and highlights, and the financial analysis I had put together showing the irregularities in HOA spending. Monday evening arrived. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was used for events and meetings. I arrived at 6:45 with Marcus. The parking lot was surprisingly full. Apparently, word had gotten around about the special meeting, and neighbors were curious. Inside, the main room was set up with chairs facing a long table at the front where the board members sat. Barbara was in the center, with Gerald and Patricia on either side. There were at least 50 people in attendance, way more than usually came to HOA meetings. Barbara's eyes widened when she saw Marcus with me. "Who is this?" "This is Marcus Chen, my attorney. Since this meeting is about potentially removing me from the community, I figured I should have legal representation." "That's allowed, right? Or is that against regulations too?" Several people in the audience chuckled. Barbara's face flushed. "Fine. Let's get started. This special meeting of the Sunset Hills HOA has been called to address serious concerns about a homeowner who has repeatedly violated community standards and obstructed HOA business. Ethan Zimmerman has shown a pattern of non-compliance and disrespect for the rules that govern our community." Marcus stood up. I'd like to interject before this goes any further. Miss Henderson, do you have documented proof of these alleged violations? Barbara shuffled papers on the table. Yes, multiple instances of parking violations, refusal to allow proper HOA inspections, and a general attitude of hostility toward HOA authority. Let's address those one by one, Marcus said smoothly. The parking violations you referenced were not actually violations at all. Mr. Zimmerman's vehicle is a classic car protected under the HOA's own regulations regarding antique and collector vehicles. As for the inspection, the HOA's governing documents clearly limit inspections to exterior areas visible from common spaces. Mr. Zimmerman was within his rights to decline access to his garage and backyard. And regarding hostility toward authority, I'm not aware of any HOA regulation requiring homeowners to be friendly. Could you please cite the specific section? The audience tittered with laughter. Barbara looked furious. This is exactly the kind of attitude I'm talking about. He thinks he can lawyer his way out of being a good neighbor. Tom Martinez stood up from the audience. Barbara, with all due respect, Ethan's been a great neighbor. He helped me understand the actual HOA rules instead of your made-up interpretations. That doesn't make him a bad person. It makes you a liar. The room erupted in conversation. People were nodding and agreeing with Tom. Patricia leaned over and whispered something to Barbara, who shook her head angrily. Order, I need order. Barbara banged a gavel on the table. This is an official HOA meeting and I will have respect. Marcus spoke again, his voice calm but firm. Miss Henderson, I think it's time we addressed some larger issues here. My client has done an extensive review of the HOA's financial records, which are public information available to all homeowners. He's discovered some concerning irregularities. Expenses that don't seem to have corresponding work completed. Payments to companies owned by your family members, missing meeting minutes, violations of proper procedure in assessment of fines. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at Barbara now, whose face had gone pale. Those are serious accusations, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I have managed this HOA's finances properly and within all guidelines. Then you won't mind if we bring in an independent auditor to verify that, Marcus said. In fact, I think the entire community would benefit from a full financial audit and review of your procedures over the past several years. Gerald Finch suddenly spoke up. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Barbara, you've always been very protective of the financial records. You never want to share details at board meetings. Maybe it's time for some transparency. Barbara turned to him, betrayed. Gerald, you're supposed to be on my side. I'm on the community's side, he said quietly. If there's nothing wrong, an audit will prove it. If there is something wrong, we need to know. Patricia nodded. I agree. I've had concerns for a while but never wanted to rock the boat, but this has gone too far. Ethan's right, we can't just kick out a homeowner because you have a personal grudge. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Homeowners started shouting questions about finances, about other decisions Barbara had made, about fines and violations that now seemed questionable. Barbara tried to maintain control, but it was clear she had lost the room. Finally, Tom Martinez made a motion. I move that we suspend any action against Ethan Zimmerman and instead conduct a full audit of HOA finances and procedures. All in favor. The room erupted in ayes. It wasn't a proper vote since this wasn't how HOA procedures worked, but it was clear the community had spoken. Barbara sat at the table looking defeated, her carefully constructed authority completely dismantled. Marcus and I left the meeting around 9 o'clock. On the way to our cars, he clapped me on the shoulder. That went about as well as could be expected. I'll get started on filing a formal complaint with the state regarding the HOA's financial management. Based on what you found and Barbara's reaction tonight, I think there's definitely something there. What happens now? Now we wait. The state will investigate. If they find evidence of fraud or embezzlement, they'll take appropriate action. In the meantime, I'd suggest you keep documenting everything. Barbara strikes me as the type who might try to retaliate. Marcus was right. Over the next few weeks, things got interesting. First, an independent auditor was brought in to review the HOA's books. The audit revealed that Barbara had been skimming money from HOA funds for years, hiding it through fake invoices and payments to companies owned by her relatives. The total amount was over $60,000. Second, a formal investigation was launched by the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs in the state. They found multiple violations of proper procedure, including failure to hold required meetings, improper assessment of fines without due process, and misuse of HOA authority for personal vendettas. Third, several other homeowners came forward with their own stories of Barbara's abuse of power. The Patel family had been fined $3,000 for their vegetable garden. The Martinez family had been threatened with liens on their property over the RV situation. An elderly couple at the end of the street had been harassed about their desert landscaping, which Barbara claimed was not green enough, even though desert landscaping was encouraged in Phoenix due to water conservation. The situation culminated on a hot afternoon in July. I was, ironically, working on my Shelby in the driveway when two police cars pulled up to Barbara's house. I watched as officers knocked on her door and, after a brief conversation, placed her in handcuffs. She was being arrested for embezzlement and fraud. As they led her to the patrol car, she looked down the street and saw me standing there. Our eyes met for a moment. There was no triumph on my part, just a kind of sad acknowledgement that this was how it had to end. She had brought this on herself through years of lying, stealing, and abusing her authority. Tom Martinez came jogging over as the police cars drove away. "Did you see that? They actually arrested her." "Yeah. Can't say I'm surprised after what the audit found." "You know, none of this would have come out if she hadn't gone after you about your car. She picked the wrong guy to mess with." I shrugged. "I was just defending myself. She did the rest." The legal proceedings took several months. Barbara was charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud. She eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a trial and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, plus full restitution to the HOA for all the money she had stolen. Her husband divorced her during the proceedings, and their house went up for sale. The HOA had to essentially rebuild from scratch. Gerald and Patricia remained on the board but brought in new members who were committed to running things properly and transparently. One of their first actions was to formally apologize to all the homeowners who had been wrongly fined or harassed under Barbara's regime. They also rewrote several of the more ambiguous regulations to make them clearer and fairer. As for me, I continued living in my house and working on my cars. The new board actually created a designated space in the community for car enthusiasts to work on their vehicles, complete with shade structures and water hookups. It became a popular gathering spot on weekends, with several neighbors bringing out their project cars and classic vehicles. My towing company also benefited from the situation in an unexpected way. Several other HOAs in the area reached out after hearing about what happened, wanting to establish contracts with a company they knew would be fair and honest. Business was booming. One Saturday morning in October, about 5 months after Barbara's arrest, I was once again in my driveway working on the Shelby. A moving truck pulled up to Barbara's old house, which had finally sold. A young family got out, a couple in their 30s with two small kids. I walked over to introduce myself. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Ethan Zimmerman." The husband shook my hand warmly. "Thanks. I'm David, this is my wife Rachel, and these are our kids Sophie and Max. We're excited to be here. The realtor said this is a really great community." "It is now," I said with a smile. "It's had some growing pains recently, but things are much better than they were." "We heard something about that," Rachel said. "Something about HOA drama. The realtor mentioned it but didn't give us details." "Let's just say the previous HOA president didn't understand that being in charge of a neighborhood doesn't make you a dictator. But she's gone now, and the new board is actually pretty reasonable." David laughed. "Good to know. Hey, is that a Shelby GT 500? Original? Sure is. Restored it myself over 3 years." "That's incredible. I'm a car guy myself, though nothing as fancy as that. I've got a 1985 Corvette that I've been working on. It's in storage right now, but I'm hoping to bring it here once we're settled. Is that okay?" "I know some HOAs are weird about project cars. You'll be fine. In fact, you should join us next weekend. We've got a little informal car club that meets on Saturday mornings at the community pavilion. Bring your Corvette and I'll show you what we've been doing." His face lit up. "Really? That sounds awesome." As I walked back to my house, I thought about how much had changed in less than a year. I had moved to Sunset Hills looking for a quiet place to live and work on my cars in peace. Instead, I had ended up taking down a corrupt HOA president, helping reform the entire community, and making some good friends in the process. The Shelby gleamed in the October sunshine, and I ran my hand along its smooth fender. This car had been the catalyst for everything. If Barbara had just left well enough alone, she would still be in power, still stealing money, still making everyone's lives miserable. But she had decided to pick a fight with the wrong person, and it had cost her everything. I did not take any pleasure in her downfall. Honestly, the whole situation was just sad. She could have been a good HOA president if she had actually cared about the community instead of power and money. She could have used her position to make the neighborhood better, to build relationships, to create a real sense of community. Instead, she had chosen to be a tyrant, and tyrants always fall eventually. My phone buzzed with a text from Rita at the office. "Just got another contract request from an HOA in Temp. Want me to send over the standard terms?" I texted back, "Yeah, but add a clause that will only tow vehicles that are legitimately abandoned or inoperable. No towing for stupid reasons." "Got it, boss. By the way, have you seen the Yelp reviews lately? Apparently, we're now famous for standing up to HOA tyranny, good for business." I chuckled and put my phone away. Who would have thought that my little confrontation with Barbara would turn into the thing my company was known for? Life was strange sometimes. Over the next few months, things settled into a comfortable routine. The new HOA board proved to be competent and fair. They held regular meetings with published agendas, managed finances transparently, and actually listened to homeowner concerns. It was amazing what a difference leadership made. The informal car club I had mentioned to David grew into a regular thing. About a dozen neighbors with various project cars and classics started meeting every Saturday morning. We would work on our vehicles, share tools and knowledge, and just enjoy the camaraderie. It turned out there were a lot of car enthusiasts in the neighborhood who had been hiding their hobby during Barbara's reign of terror. Tom Martinez brought his RV one weekend and gave tours to all the kids in the neighborhood. It was a beautiful restored 1978 Airstream that he and his wife had spent years renovating. Under Barbara, He had been threatened with fines and liens for even parking it in his driveway temporarily. Now, the HOA board was talking about creating an RV parking area in the community for residents to use. The Patel family expanded their vegetable garden and started a community garden program where neighbors could rent small plots to grow their own vegetables. It was hugely popular, especially among the retired residents who had the time to tend gardens regularly. Mrs. Patel organized garden workshops and taught people how to grow vegetables in the Arizona heat, which was no small feat. As for my Shelby, it remained my pride and joy. I drove it regularly, entered it in a few local car shows, and even won a trophy at a Phoenix Classic car exhibition in November. The trophy sat on a shelf in my garage, right next to the crumpled violation notice Barbara had left on my mailbox all those months ago. I kept it as a reminder of how far things had come. One evening in December, I got a call from Gerald Finch, who was now the HOA president. "Ethan, I wanted to give you a heads up. We're having our annual holiday meeting next week and the board wants to present you with something." "Oh. What kind of something? You'll see. Just trust me, it's a good thing. Can you make it? Tuesday at 7. I'll be there." The following Tuesday, I showed up at the clubhouse to find it decorated for the holidays and packed with residents. There was food, drinks, and a general festive atmosphere. When Gerald called the meeting to order, he asked me to come up front. "Ethan, when you moved to Sunset Hills less than a year ago, our community was in trouble. We had a leader who was corrupt, dishonest, and using her position for personal gain. You could have just paid the fines, moved your car, and kept your head down like so many others did. Instead, you stood up for what was right. You exposed corruption, helped reform our HOA, and in the process, you made this neighborhood a better place for everyone. On behalf of the entire board and community, we want to present you with this." He handed me a plaque. It read, "Presented to Ethan Zimmerman in recognition of his courage, integrity, and dedication to the Sunset Hills community. Thank you for standing up when it mattered most." The room erupted in applause. I was genuinely touched, not expecting anything like this. Thank you all. I really didn't do anything special. I just refused to be bullied, and I think that's something everyone should do. No one should have to live in fear of their HOA or feel like they can't enjoy their home and property. I'm glad things worked out the way they did, even though it was messy for a while. After the meeting, dozens of neighbors came up to thank me personally or share their own stories about how the community had improved. It was humbling and gratifying at the same time. As I drove home that night, the Shelby's engine rumbling beneath me, I reflected on the entire crazy journey. It had started with such a simple thing, a woman demanding I garage my classic car. Such a petty, ridiculous demand. But that one moment had set off a chain of events that exposed years of corruption, reformed an entire HOA, and brought a community together in unexpected ways. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment before turning off the engine. Through my windshield, I could see my garage, with space for all my vehicles and room to work on them whenever I wanted. I could see my house, which I owned free and clear, in a neighborhood where I felt welcome and respected. And I could see my neighbors' houses, where good people lived who had become friends. The irony was not lost on me that Barbara's attempt to tow my car had failed specifically because I owned the towing company. If she had done even basic research, she would have known that. But people like Barbara did not do research. They did not care about facts or fairness. They cared about power and control, and that was ultimately their downfall. I got out of the car and closed the garage door behind me. Inside my house, I hung the plaque on the wall in my office, right where I could see it while I worked. It would serve as a reminder that standing up to bullies, even when it is difficult, is always worth it. The legal proceedings wrapped up completely by early January. Barbara served her sentence. The restitution was paid back to the HOA, and the case was closed. The community moved on, thriving under new leadership. Property values actually increased, not because of strict enforcement of petty rules, but because people wanted to live in a neighborhood that was fair, friendly, and well managed. My towing company also continued to grow. We landed several more HOA contracts, always with the stipulation that we would only tow legitimately problematic vehicles. We became known throughout the Phoenix area as the ethical choice for towing services, which was a reputation I was proud to have earned. The Shelby remained a fixture in my driveway whenever I worked on it, and no one ever complained again. In fact, it became something of a neighborhood landmark. Parents would bring their kids by to look at it. Car enthusiasts would stop to admire it, and it appeared in several of the HOA's promotional materials as an example of the classic vehicles that made Sunset Hills special. On a warm February evening, almost a full year after the initial confrontation with Barbara, I was sitting in my garage with the bay door open, polishing chrome and listening to classic rock on the radio. David from across the street walked over with his son Max, who was about 8 years old. "Hey Ethan, got a minute? Max has been begging to see the Shelby up close." "Sure, come on in." I put down my polishing cloth and gestured them over. "Max, this is a 1967 Shelby GT 500. It's got a 7-liter V8 engine that makes about 350 horsepower. It's one of the most famous American muscle cars ever made." Max's eyes were huge as he looked at the car. "It's so cool. Can I sit in it?" "Sure, hop in." I opened the driver's door and Max climbed into the seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel with reverence. David smiled. "He's been obsessed with cars since we moved here. I think the car club meetings every Saturday really inspired him. He wants to restore a car with me when he's older." "That's great. There's something special about working on cars, especially with family. My dad and I restored a Mustang together when I was in high school, some of my best memories." "I heard about what happened with the previous HOA president," David said quietly. "The whole towing company thing, that's pretty wild. It was definitely unexpected. I never imagined moving to a suburb would turn into such an adventure." "Well, I'm glad you stood up to her. Rachel and I almost didn't buy the house because we heard the HOA was really strict. But then we talked to Tom Martinez at the open house, and he explained what had happened. He said you had completely changed the community culture. That's what convinced us to buy." Max climbed out of the car, his face glowing with excitement. "Dad, we need to get a car like this. Maybe someday, buddy. Maybe someday." After they left, I sat in my garage watching the sun set over the desert mountains in the distance. Phoenix was beautiful in its own way, harsh and unforgiving but also vibrant and full of life. I had built a good life here, a successful business, a nice home, great neighbors, and the freedom to pursue my hobbies without harassment. The story of the HOA president who tried to tow my classic car without knowing I owned the towing company had become something of a legend in the area. People brought it up at business meetings. I was asked to tell the story at car club gatherings, and it even made it into a local news article about HOA reform efforts in Arizona. But for me, it was never really about the dramatic confrontation or the satisfaction of seeing Barbara get her comeuppance. It was about standing up for basic fairness and refusing to let anyone make me feel small in my own home. That was a principle worth fighting for, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. The Shelby sat in my garage, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. a testament to American engineering and my own determination to preserve something beautiful. In a way, that car represented everything the fight with Barbara had been about: the right to own something you love, to take pride in it, to display it and enjoy it without fear of arbitrary rules or vindictive neighbors. I finished my polishing, locked up the garage, and went inside. Life was good. The HOA functioned properly, my business thrived, and I could work on my cars in peace. Sometimes, standing your ground and refusing to back down really does make all the difference. Barbara had learned that lesson the hard way, and I hoped other petty tyrants in HOAs across America might learn from her example. The next morning, I woke up to find a letter in my mailbox from the new HOA board. For a moment, my heart sank, old anxieties resurfacing. But when I opened it, I found it was just a newsletter about upcoming community events and improvements planned for the new year. No threats, no violations, no demands, just information and communication the way it should be. I smiled and tossed the newsletter on my kitchen counter. In the garage, the Shelby waited for its next drive. And in the driveway, there was plenty of room to park it whenever I wanted to work on it or simply admire it in the Arizona sunshine. That freedom, that simple ability to enjoy my property and my possessions without harassment, was worth everything.